setting up this building in a manner that's compliant with all the protocols and safe for the players and the coaches. They did a lot of work. We'd like to thank Miss Amy for providing us with, the funds that we need to make this thing safe and functional, and allow our players to learn and to condition and get themselves ready for a football season. So they put a lot of work into it. It looks great. There's a lot of space and a lot of area, from the cafeteria to the weight room to the bubble, and how we're able to function with the meeting rooms and moving those around. So I'd like to just first start out by thanking them, and then taking any questions that you guys have as we kick this thing off.
Teresa's there, so if you want to start with her.
Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Mike. As you guys are getting started and with all the precautions that have been taking place, you've got guys starting to test. Then you hear from Major League Baseball, a bunch of the Marlins now have tested positive, even from yesterday. How worried are you of being able to get through this training camp, let alone a season?
Well, not try to use worried, Teresa. Obviously always very concerned about the health and safety of our players and their family and the coaches and our staff in this building. But until we see how our protocols and our plan that the NFL and the Players Association worked so hard to put into place, till we see how those are going to function and work, we can't make any changes. We have to follow the plan. And then when we're not happy with how things are going, then we have to quickly change the plan. So right now we're going to move forward with our plan of how we test the players when they come in and they report. They'll test today, they'll test tomorrow, they'll take a day off, they'll test again, and then they'll begin their physical procedures. So, we'll have a pretty good idea of how that's going. And again, we're happy with this Titans bubble that we've created, throughout this process.
Jim Wyatt?
Mike, I guess at the start, you mentioned the testing. What else are you allowed to do at the start as far as potentially having Zoom meetings as you gear up for a lot of conditioning work after that?
Yeah, the plan is broken up into two groups. We brought the group in on the 23rd, and again now here on the 28th, and the days are you're looking at a 7-day window to start this thing off, and there's a test and a self-quarantine. The next day there's a test and a self-quarantine. Hopefully on the third day the players are more conscious of the quarantine. The fourth day would be their third COVID test. On the fifth day there'll be physicals that will be performed, and any other administrative meetings. On the sixth day there would be some more, equipment fitting and more procedural work, some videos from the NFL. And then on the seventh day, we can start to have them come in and begin to have a normal day of lifting and meeting and running and a walkthrough. But, it's important for our rookies, that these guys, all but one, I think Darrington Evans, we visited before the facilities were shut down. So for one player, they hadn't been in this building, and so they didn't know where the cafeteria was. And, so we were able to split up into groups and do some walkthroughs and show them where the meeting rooms were, show them where, stop and have a meeting with Todd and the protocols that have to happen in the training room, and where guys need to tape and how we're going to operate with the cold tubs and treatment, and then work through into the weight room with Frank and his staff and how we can properly physically distance ourselves as we work out and train and keep to that number of 15, which was negotiated by the league and the Players Association.
John Glennon.
Hey, Mike.
Hi, John.
A lot of reports, I guess, this morning about players deciding to opt out, including one about one of your undrafted guys, Anthony McKinney. Wondering if you can say whether that one in particular is accurate or not, and whether you believe that you'll have any other guys choose to opt out?
So obviously very sensitive to the feelings of those players around the league that have done that. My focus is on our team, like it always is. But Anthony McKinney did inform John and myself that he was going to opt out, and we support all those players that have done that. As far as future players, have not talked to any of them. But again, we'll wait till our players make the decision that's in the best interest for them and their family before we proceed. And I think they have until Monday to do that. But Anthony came in and shared that message with us, and so we went ahead and moved moved him to the list and tried to get him where he needed to be.
Luke?
Mike, oftentimes training camp is very, very regimented when it comes to the schedule of things that you all want to get done in specific time frames. But with things the way that they are, how much will flexibility have to play into that with you and the rest of your staff as you come up with plans and a schedule?
Well, I mean, I think that's what we try to operate in. We try to have a schedule that we feel like is best for the players to be able to learn and develop and grow together as a team, and then always remain flexible, be able to adjust, be adaptive to what is going on around us and doing what's best for the team. So, we always have ideas on what those days are going to look like, but we always have to be willing to adjust and be flexible, just like we are during the season.
And then you mentioned some of the ideas that you have discussed and come up with for physical distancing and things like that, especially when it comes to what the actual practices will look like. How much of that has kind of been figured out and how much remains an ongoing discussion as to what the protocols will look like?
Well, the protocols are such that, players, but we have to be socially distanced in a meeting. Our squad meeting is in the bubble. Our offensive and defensive unit meetings are in the bubbles. The first, 8 days that they begin activity is lifting and running. And, we work our way through different phases as it relates to having the coaches with them, after that 9-day window. And then we work through an OTA process where we'll look like we would normally look at, let's say, veteran mini camp or the first few days of the acclimatization period of training camp. And then we'll have a day off and we'll get into some, full pads. And, there's days off in there and there's different days, and I'm just trying to be conscious of their bodies and their health and also getting the work in that we need to get in.
Eric?
Hey, Mike. I know in June you talked about potentially handing out off-season awards like you would during a normal off-season. Did you end up doing that? And if so, what were some of the things that guys were able to do to stand out to you during what was a very unusual off-season?
Yeah, I think I appreciate you bringing that up. I haven't been able to recognize those players in front of the team because we haven't had an opportunity to have everybody there. Our first full squad meeting won't occur until the afternoon of August 2nd. Just the way that these two groups overlap and how they, acclimatize themselves into training camp. So that will occur. And really it was just my evaluation, coach's evaluation of who we felt like really took great strides in the meeting room. And, it's a good mix of players. Some of these players aren't full-time starters. Some of them are relatively new to our team. Some of them have been here, but just the development and their progression in our system through the meetings.
Paul Kaharski?
Hey, Mike.
Hi, Paul.
for starters, where will that team meeting occur on August 2nd, and how will you be able to gather everybody as you need to?
Right. I don't know if I had my mute on when I just mentioned that. It would be in the
I'm sorry.
bubble, or you were checking your Twitter, or I'm not sure, Paul, but I'll revisit this again. I want to thank the people that allowed us to move into the bubble with social and physical distancing. Anthony Pastrana, our video coordinator, and all those members of John's staff that turned our bubble, into meeting rooms. And that we have speakers, we have wireless headsets for the coaches, for each coach to wear, assigned seating so that players are coming back in the same seat after they leave. We clean them, but they're coming back into the same seats. We'll obviously clean them. Our cleaning staff, Johnny and LaCoya, who are going through here after people leave the weight room. There's a crossover time. You have to build in time to clean the weight room. But we have screens outside set up. So that's where we'll be doing all that stuff. And we'll transition from a squad meeting to a special teams meeting, and then to our offensive and defensive unit meetings.
I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning.
That's okay,
Did you also,
Paul. Go ahead.
Did you also cover whether Jadeveon Clowney's been to town to meet with your doctors, or if he's scheduled to do so?
As of now, I don't think that Jadeveon Clowney is scheduled to be on a flight in here to meet with our doctors as it stands at 12/27.
Thank you.
Terry?
Mike, some of the teams and people around the league have talked about an idea of quarantining their quarterbacks and not allowing them to intermingle with each other because of the risk of potentially getting or spreading the virus among them and being without a quarterback. Have you given that thought any consideration as you go through camp and get ready for the regular season?
Well, I think that's a conversation that we'll obviously have to have when it gets closer to the season, Terry. I think we're at a time now where, we have to trust the testing procedures and the protocols that are in place, and allow these guys to meet and to walk through. But there's going to certainly be conversations that we'll have to have as it relates to players and whether that's, there's the practice squad is bigger and there's 4 players that you can protect and that you can bring up whenever you need to and take them back down. And there's a lot of different things with the roster that are going to be different. But as of now, there hasn't been a conversation as far as, keeping a guy away. Does that make him safer unless he's in a true quarantine, at his own house and never leaves? Is he any safer outside than he is in our building? So we can protect him here. I think it's everybody's responsibility, our players and our coaches and our staff to make sure that we're doing everything that we can when we leave here to be as responsible as we can be.
Corey Curtis?
Hey, Coach. Welcome back for another season.
Hi, Corey.
Just wondering about the locker room situation. Can you be compliant with 80 guys in there, or have you had to figure out another way to house guys, and how is that going?
We went through that process early on when we knew that this was going to be something that we needed to do. And we were able to install dividers in between the lockers that go out 4 feet, so that there's a divider in between each locker. Everything that you do needs to be submitted through the Players Association and through the NFL. That process was approved, and so we were able to house everybody in one locker room. The other alternative was, you're going to have to make the bubble into, you're going to have to put lockers out in the bubble and go from there. But we were able to install dividers that passed that was sufficient for the protocol.
Teron?
What's up, Coach?
Hi, TD.
A lot of the coaches across the league, head coaches that is, they're doing things just like specifically for them, just to kind of be extra cautious, or like things are implemented protocols for them, especially the older head coaches? Not saying you're an older head coach, but is that something that has been approached for you?
No, I mean, I just think that we have to continue to rely upon the daily testing that we're in now, and then again, be responsible as we leave here. We put a lot of time in here at the building, which obviously I personally feel very, very comfortable and safe in, and then and then head home. So that's my plan as it relates to my own personal health.
Also, with the evaluation process, as you get ready for that, not having the preseason games, how does that change like the way you have to look at some of these undrafted guys or even roster bubble guys?
Well, I think the evaluation will start here when we get into the meetings and the walkthroughs, and then continue. And then when you watch them at practice, you have to evaluate the competitive situations. Can they, can they stay on their feet? Can they tackle? We may have to have, some scrimmages where some of these younger players are in a live situation as it relates to tackling, and it's so critical on special teams. I'm not ready to tell you that we're going to go live on special teams, but we're going to have to put guys in competitive situations to be able to evaluate them. And we've done that in the past when we have had games. So or scrimmages. We've split the team up before, and we've had players draft teams, and we've gone out and operated in the stadium, and we'll have to have some of those days.
Thanks.
Buck.
Hey, Coach.
Hi, Buck.
How have guys been handling the acclimation process back? I know you said you won't have a full team meeting until August the 2nd, but just as you work them back into the process of virtual and now physically in person at the facility, how have they handled that process so far?
Well, again, I told you that I felt like they were great during the virtual process of the spring. We could be meeting with these guys virtually right now. Didn't feel like that was the right thing once they tested. I think we're going to rely upon our in-person meetings when they come back here after going through the testing protocol. So they've done everything that we've asked them to do. And then we'll continue to move forward with that.
Chris Harris.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good, Chris. How are you?
Just fine, sir. So many of the conversations with players and coaches and whatever has been centered around what's safe for them and their families and what they feel comfortable with. You mentioned that you feel safe in the building. I'm curious as what the conversation was like between you and your family, coming to a consensus about what was best for you guys.
Well, I mean, I think you guys have seen my family. Our health is important. Nothing is more important than my family or this football team. Tyler went away. Tyler's going through this right now in Boston College. So he's a part of it. He's working his way back in. Carter's going to go to junior college, and I'm sure they're waiting to see what's going on. They're supposed to be there in the middle of August. And so I don't think anybody had we're very sensitive to this pandemic and the impact that it's made on our world and so many people throughout. But, I don't think that there was any consideration that Tyler, when given the opportunity to go back to Boston College, was going to go back, or me coming back to coach this football team. So, again, we've trusted in the process and are very appreciative of the protocols that everybody's put in place for us to work and coach this football team.
Joe Rushford.
Hey, Mike, I was just wondering if you can tell us anything more about defensive plans, defensive play calling, and even if in this camp anything will be different from you other than obviously the pandemic related stuff, just in terms of transitioning to life without Dean Pease?
Well, Dean hasn't been with us since the end of the season, so I feel like we've transitioned on, just like every other year. There's a lot of change, there's turnover. I'm very appreciative of what Dean, what he provided for 2 years. But again, extremely excited about the staff that we have now working defensively. I think that, again, I'll reiterate what I said in June. When I'm not in front of the defense, Shane Bowen will be that voice. When I'm not in a defensive meeting with the coaches, that will be Shane will be running it. And I would imagine that as we continue to work through practices and in an unscripted environment, we'll come up with ways to make calls, whether I make them or whether Shane makes them, or we're going to work through that process as we get through practice. And we're going to start August 14th with one of our first OTAs, and then as we work through and use the time and have unscripted periods or have scrimmage settings, we'll see how that play calling process goes.
John Burton.
Hey, Coach, how you doing?
Good, John. How are you?
Not bad. Just curious, kind of piggybacking on what TD was talking about with your rookies and first-year players with this accelerated process and no preseason games to evaluate them with. How much onus are you putting on them to really get up to speed and get ready? Thanks.
Well, there's a lot of it's on the player, but what we have to, as coaches, give them every opportunity, and we have to teach, we have to develop, and then we have to inspire them. And, I told them yesterday, if you guys believe all this stuff about undrafted free agents aren't going to have an opportunity to make NFL rosters, I said, you guys are nuts. You have an opportunity because you're sitting here and everybody's working under the same rules. So to think that, one player is going to be the same player he was last year because he played in preseason games. If he hadn't gotten any better, he's probably not going to be any good in practice setting either. So once we've given them the tools to go out and the confidence and the trust to do their job, then it's on them to go out and to take every opportunity that they have during the practice and the walkthroughs and give themselves every advantage to be a player that ends up making this roster.
Gentry.
Yeah. Hey, Mike. Obviously so much of the season's going to revolve around the decisions guys make away from the facility and what could happen. How do you kind of balance treating guys as professionals and letting them, live their lives versus maybe mandating or trying to control what happens away from the facility?
Well, one, you can't control, I've learned that you can't control people. You have to try to influence them the best that you can. And especially not going to be able to control a professional football player outside the building. So I know the type of people that John and I and Miss Amy have tried to bring onto this football team. And I know that it's important to them, that their health and safety and their family's health and safety is important to them. So I'm again, always hopeful that we're making the right decisions away from here, and doing everything that can maintain the best health that we can.
David Beauclair.
Mike, I'm curious, how much thought have you given to dealing with potential doldrums that could develop with no joint workouts, no preseason games and everything? Do you feel like you have a plan if you need to address that at some point?
Well, we've thought about it. We've thought about the mental toll, David, that takes place over the course of this process. Even talking about leaving for a preseason game that's supposed to be played on a Saturday in August. You have a walkthrough and then you get on a plane and you leave and you maybe get to Washington and you grab a steak with the position group and you have a team meeting at 7:30 or a position meeting at 7:30 and another meeting at 10:30 in the morning after breakfast. And then you can sit around, study your game plan, get prepared, whatever you need to do, play a game, and you have the next day off. And so that's a little bit of a window, and you're traveling and you're breaking it up. So very conscious of what the schedule looks like. And it was hard and difficult this year because, again, we didn't get the schedule up until just a few days ago. And so it's been changed and it's been tinkered with just a few times, quite honestly, to get where we feel like it's going to allow the players to work and have a day off and work a few days. We've built in some, regeneration days where we're not practicing and, we're just meeting and trying to get these guys out. And so hopefully we can settle into a schedule that's very functional and for the players.
Steve Lamon.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. I think you said a couple years ago in your first season that you used sort of every experience you had as a player and as an assistant coach to prepare you for what it would be like when you had your own team. And last season, I know you said that you kind of built off of the unknowns you learned as your first season going into year two, and you felt better about training camp. With this being so unique, does it feel a little bit like you're a rookie coach again this year dealing with all this stuff? And what's your biggest concern because of all the changes this year going into camp?
Well, the change, we can't eliminate distractions. It's impossible. I've learned that we have to handle them and to manage them the best that we can. And again, I would just say that the biggest concern is just going to be the health and the safety of our football team. I mean, that's what it always has been. But we're still going to have sore feet and bad backs and blisters and tight groins, but we're going to navigate through a pandemic, the likes of which that we've never seen or experienced. So those are all going to still happen through training camp, but now we're going to have to manage, a disease that's ravaging across the country as we enter into training camp.
Johnny Franks.
Mike, as a player, and understand the challenges of being on a team where the expectations was being the last team standing. Knowing how last year ended, how is it different and how is it the same as a head coach?
I mean, I think the standards and the expectations will always be the best and the highest. I mean, that's just what it is in the National Football League. Every year, there's such turnover, and teams that maybe won 4 or 5 games win 10 and 11 the next, or win the Super Bowl. And it's a competitive league. We understand that. So the expectations and the standards that we set aren't going to change. We fell short of winning a championship, but there was some things that we did well. There's some things that we're going to have to improve on, and there's some things that we're going to have to continue to enhance and build on.
Rick Russo.
Hey, Mike, I apologize if you touched on this earlier, but possible concerns about players opting out, and have you had any guys indicate that they might do so?
So obviously very respectful of whatever decision the players make for their own personal health and safety and that of their family as it relates to around the league. We have had one player this morning inform us that he would opt out, Anthony McKissic, an undrafted player, offensive lineman. So we had that conversation with him. He had our obviously full support. And then, we're just in the process of getting him to where he needs to be, which is with his family.
Coach, we've got 5 follow-ups. You got time to run through these real quick?
Sure. Paul already had his follow-up, though.
Teresa, you had one?
Yeah, Mike, you touched on it a little bit a couple questions ago, but the continuity that you have on your staff, how much, and particularly on your offensive starters on that side of the ball, how much does that help through this unique year that, literally no one's gone through before?
Well, we've all had the same amount of meeting time, Teresa, for this year, whether that was returning staff or new staff. Maybe new staff had an extra week of Zoom meetings. But in the end, you're going to have to be able to provide the player with knowledge and skill set and fundamentals that allow them to go out there and do their job. And I'm confident that we have the staff in place that will do that, from our strength and conditioning staff that's going to work with these guys here tomorrow throughout the season, or a coaching staff that's going to try to prepare them for situations that may come up in all three phases.
Jim Wyatt.
Mike, I don't think we've talked to you since Derrick Henry got his new contract. Just wanted to ask you about how happy you were with that, and maybe how much good does that do in the locker room when players see their teammate get rewarded after all he's done and how hard he's worked?
Well, there's a lot of guys that are important to this football team. I would say Derrick's, at the top of that list with a handful of guys. Extremely happy for him. Happy that John was able and his staff was able to get something done. We're always excited to get our players, our core players, under contract for more than the current year. And so, as it relates to the locker room, I think you're always conscious of transactions. I'd like to think that, the contracts could stay out of the locker room, but they have a tendency to sometimes filter in. And so I don't know. I think our guys, I hope that they think that, we're going to try to take care of guys, but we're also going to always do what's best for the team, because that's important too. So excited to have Derrick extended. He was under contract. This is going to provide that he's got, some more years with us. He's such an impact for us, such a unique player. And again, I've touched on his leadership that's continued to grow. And that's the thing that when we get all back in here, that I'm looking forward to, to the most.
John Lennon. John, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Mike, I just wanted to touch base one more time on the ever popular Clowney front. I think earlier this offseason, you said that you hadn't talked to him during this whole period. Wonder if that's changed at all, and if it hadn't, would you consider that, given your past relationship with him and the success he had under you?
John, right now, JD is not under contract with the Tennessee Titans. That's all I can tell you guys. He's a free agent, one that we've had contact with, but he's not under contract with the Tennessee Titans. So that's all I can tell you.
Paul?
You mentioned earlier you weren't necessarily going to go so far as to have live snaps for special teams. I was wondering, you sounded playful there. Are there scenarios where you'd consider having some live snaps during this whole thing to get real evaluations of some of the young guys?
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't being playful. I just was saying, like, we may have to go live when live up until the returner. We're not going to go down and smoke the returner. That's all I was saying. Like, just, so that there's some space and some distance with some of these return games. This is critical. That we don't go out there and our first live kickoff return is September 15th and somebody gets hurt, because that's the last thing that you want to do, and say, well, I just wasn't ready for that guy and his speed to come down there as he was covering the kickoff, because we all know that's what's going to happen on September 15th on Monday night, that they're going to be flying down there. So let's not be shocked.
How about offense defense?
if you give me a chance, Paul, I'm going to finish. I really appreciate you and the questions that you ask. I'm going to get to that. There's a very good chance. We're never going to cut, Paul. We're never going to ask our offensive linemen to cut our defensive linemen in practice, which sometimes during the game, their block and their assignment would tell them that they would have to. But do I think that Darrington Evans needs to get tackled? Yeah, probably at some point in time through training camp. Darrington needs to get tackled because on September 15th, he's going to try to get hit and tackled really hard and as legally as the Broncos and the rest of the team that we play do. So, that's something that I have to consider and look at. But we're not gonna cut players to the ground during training camp.
Hey, I know it may be a while off, and just wanted to ask if you haven't made a decision yet about post-practice interviews. It would be a monumental difference for us if we were able to talk to you in person from a distance with all the safety protocols put in. If we had a chance to discuss that with you further, if you needed, we'd appreciate it. But any further consideration you might give to that, we'd really appreciate it.
As far as this interview, this media session right now after practice?
Yes. I know that my understanding is
I mean, just
for in person.
There's a suggestion box outside of my office on Stretch's desk. Feel free to hand it to Robbie. He can place it in the suggestion box, and we'll go and we'll look at it accordingly. Paul, we'll do whatever is best for us and for you guys, because this is your opportunity to cover our team and to promote our team to our fans. So whatever's best for that, I'll be available. Right? So, I'll talk to Robbie and whatever's best for that, to promote our team and our players. That's what we'll do. But I appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Last two, Joe Rexroad.
Mike, I wanted to ask about Isaiah Wilson. A situation like this, an offseason like this, how does that affect the timeline for a guy like that who, I guess we would presume, would be in a position battle, at a competitive position with Dennis Kelly? I mean, how do you view, him right now and his opportunity given what he's missed?
Coach, you're muted.
Sorry, I think the lines of scrimmage, Joe, I think are something that there's some carryover with from the college level, especially playing in a big conference or for a big school, that carries over, because some of the techniques may be somewhat different, but a lot of the blocking schemes are going to be similar. Now the names may be different or what we call it, but he'll have time to get out on the field. And I would say that the playbook probably isn't quite as large than, let's say, a wide receiver. The learning, if I'm a right tackle, I know that I'm going to go out there and I'm going to line up next to the right guard and I'm going to have a split. But with a receiver, his alignment may be on either side. It may be inside. It may be outside. It's on top of the numbers. It's 2 yards inside the numbers. And so, we're hopeful that we'll get him up to speed after seeing him in the Zoom meetings and now, having him here, and we'll go from there.
Buck, bring us home.
Last one, Coach. How does someone in your position consume all the coverage of return to sports, knowing that you need to have all the information at your disposal? Or is it just, what the league tells us to do, we're going to do, and I'm not going to pay attention to everything else that's being put out there?
Well, it's always important that you follow the protocols from the league. The league sends out a lot of memos. And again, it's a fine line, and one that we're really not sure how it's going to go. There's questions about the season, and we're focused on today. We're focused on the tests that we've gotten back today and the players that are in our building. That's what we're focused on, and continuing to not look too far ahead, but obviously always plan for things that may come up. And then, I think it's important because a lot of these things are collectively bargained through the Players Association. We are waiting for input from the league on how to handle and make sure that everybody's following the protocols and we're doing what's best for the player. So I do want to say, because the waiver wire is going to go out today, and I'm not going to take any more questions, but I am just going to let you know that Jayon will be on the PUP. Jayon Brown will be on the PUP list to start training camp. And then Isaiah Wilson was placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. So that you guys have that prior to the waiver wire going out. And that's all I'll do to talk about the roster as it stands now. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Mike.